See. Hello. So my name is Anne. Today we're doing the extra credit presentation covering the topics that we covered in Practical 2. And so here's just a little quick table of contents of what I'll be going through. So I'll be talking about the major brain regions we covered in class, as long as the endocrine topics. So let's just get into it. We're going to start off with the brain. So the largest part of the brain is the cerebrum. It's responsible for higher level thinking, memory, and voluntary movement, sensory awareness, language, decision making, and it's divided into two hemispheres and four main lobes. So the first lobe is the frontal lobe. It handles planning, judgment, voluntary movement, personality, motor, and speech. The parietal lobe processes touch, temperature, pressure, spatial awareness. The temporal lobe is responsible for our hearing, language comprehension, and memory formation as well. And the occipital lobe is our visual processing center. Next, we're going to a little bit about the diencephalon, which includes two major structures. It includes the thalamus, which acts as our relay station for almost all of our sensory information, and also the hypothalamus, which regulates hunger, thirst, temperature, sleep hormones, and the autonomic nervous system overall. We also have the brainstem. So I think I have a different picture over here. Yes, we have the midbrain, pons, and the medulla oblongata, which make up the brainstem. The midbrain controls reflexive movements of the eyes and head. The pons regulates breathing and acts as a communication bridge, and the medulla oblongata is important for crucial for heart rate, blood pressure, and breathing. Finally, we have the cerebellum, which coordinates balance, posture, movement, and controlled movement as well. Yes, and we're going to be talking about the spinal cord next. So next is the spinal cord. The spinal cord has two main types of matter. It has gray matter and white matter. Gray matter is in the center. It's in that butterfly shape here, and this is where neuron cell bodies, synapses, and processing centers are. The white matter is on the outside, and it's made from myelinated axons that carry long-distance signals up to the brain and down from the brain. The spinal cord is also divided into dorsal horns and ventral horns. The dorsal horns process sensory information, where this is where signals enter from the spinal cord from the body. This is things like touch, pain, temperature, pressure, and proprioception. This all comes from the dorsal root and the dorsal root ganglion. The dorsal root ganglion holds the cell bodies of the sensory neurons. Sensory information always enters through the posterior side. The ventral horns are completely motor. This is where motor neurons cell bodies are located. This is when motor commands leave the spinal cord and travel out towards muscles and glands as well. So sensory information comes to the back, and motor information comes anteriorly through the front. The spinal cord also carries two major pathways. It contains the ascending pathways and the descending pathways. Oh, these are not pictured. Ascending pathways carry information upwards towards the brain, and descending pathways carry motor commands downwards from the brain to the body. Now, the spinal cord is also organized into different levels, including the cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal regions. Each level controls a different region of the body. So the cervical spine, which are the bones C1 to C8, control the neck, shoulders, arms, and hands. The thoracic levels T1 to T12 control the chest, upper back, and abdominal muscles. The lumbar levels L1 to L5 control the lower back and the front of the legs. And then the sacral levels S1 to S5 control the back of the legs, pelvic organs, and bowel and bladder function as well. Each spinal cord level gives rise to spinal nerves, and this is where the central nervous system becomes part of the peripheral nervous system as well. So the spinal cord sends out 31 pairs of spinal nerves, and each spinal nerve is formed by the fusion of a dorsal root and ventral root, like we just discussed. And like we said, the dorsal root carries sensory fibers to the CNS, and the ventral root carries motor fibers out of the CNS. And when they merge, they form a mixed spinal nerve, which is shown here. It carries both sensory and motor information. And then after the spinal nerve exits the vertebral column, it branches into the peripheral nerves that travel throughout the body. Peripheral nerves consist of going to the anatomy. Peripheral nerves consist of bundles of axons called fascicles. Each nerve is organized in layers to protect these axons and keep their signals from interfering with each other. There are three main layers of connective tissue. Which are the endoneurium, perineurium, and epineurium. So the endoneurium surrounds the individual axon, protecting it and keeping the environment stable. The perineurium wraps around each fascicle, which is basically a bundle of axons like grouped together. And outside of everything, covering everything, is the epineurium, which wraps the entire nerve. The peripheral nerves also contain both sensory and motor fibers, which means that they are also mixed nerves, like we discussed before. Um, Let me see. Okay, so that's a little bit about the anatomy of the peripheral nerves. We're going to talk now about more steroid hormones and receptors. So, steroid hormones work very differently from most of the other hormones just because they are lipid soluble. This means that they can dissolve right through the phospholipid bilayer of the cell without needing a membrane receptor. They don't need any channels or receptors for that. So once the steroid hormone is inside the cell, it finds its specific intracellular receptor, and these receptors are usually located either in the cytoplasm or already inside the nucleus. Examples of steroid hormones include cortisol, aldosterone, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. When the hormone binds to its receptor, they form what's called a hormone receptor complex. This complex acts like a key that unlocks specific genes. Um, and then inside the nucleus, hormone receptor complex binds to DNA sequences called hormone response elements, or HREs, and these act like switches for the genes. So this is how it connects to the genes. And then when the complex binds to the HRE, it activates transcription, where the DNA can is signaled to start making the mRNA, and then mRNA leaves the nucleus and goes to ribosomes, where it can be used as the template to build proteins. Um, Steroid hormones don't quickly cause these changes. They're a little slower than the regular hormones, but that also makes it last a lot faster. So the last a lot longer. So steroid hormones, they are slower to be enacted, but then they last a longer amount of time. So we're going to talk a little bit about astrocytes next. So astrocytes are another a cell type that plays a big role in structural support. So they act like scaffolding. They hold neurons in place and anchor them to blood vessels. They also help guide developing neurons during early brain development, also like a roadmap, telling neurons where to go and where to form synapses. Astrocytes contribute to nutrient supply as well. They take up glucose from the bloodstream and convert it into lactate, which neurons can use as an energy source. They also play a role in repairing nervous tissue. When there's any kind of injury, astrocytes may migrate to the damaged area and form a glial scar. This helps protect the surrounding healthy neurons, although sometimes it can also limit regrowth. Um, recently, astrocytes have also been shown to help with synaptic communication through gliotransmitters as well. So that's another thing to know about astrocytes. We're going to talk a bit about epinephrine and norepinephrine. So these are both hormones and neurotransmitters that play a major role in the body's fight or flight responses. So they're produced in the adrenal medulla, which is the inner part of the adrenal gland. The adrenal medulla releases them into the bloodstream under the control of the sympathetic nervous system, especially during stress, fear, or anything that requires action, even things like exercise. And even though epinephrine and norepinephrine are pretty similar, they still have different effects on the organs. So starting with epinephrine, it's also been known as adrenaline, and it has strongest effects on the heart, lungs, and metabolism. So in the heart, epinephrine increases the heart rate and increases the force of each contraction. In the lungs, it causes bronchodilation. In the liver, epinephrine stimulates glycogen breakdown into glucose so the body has more energy available. In skeletal muscle, it increases blood flow by dilating blood vessels. This allows your muscles to work faster. In the skin and digestive organs, epinephrine also reduces the blood flow because the body is prioritizing survival functions over digestion. Um, Now going on to norepinephrine, it's pretty similar, but it's more focused on the blood vessels and blood pressure. It's also produced in the adrenal medulla, but it's heavily used as a neurotransmitter released from sympathetic nerve endings throughout the body. The biggest effect that norepinephrine has is vasoconstriction, especially in the skin, digestive organs, and most peripheral tissues. This raises the blood pressure and redistributes blood to the vital organs such as the heart and the brain. Um, yeah, together both epinephrine and norepinephrine work as a team. Epinephrine is more about increasing cardiac output and boosting the energy available, while norepinephrine is more about maintaining blood pressure and directing blood to where it needs to go. Both hormones are essential for survival during stress, emergencies, or even regular activities such as strenuous activities such as exercise. We're on to another hormone, which is the growth hormone. So, growth hormone is often called GH, known to as GH, or it's also called somatotropin. It's one of the major hormones involved in growth, metabolism, and overall body development. It's produced and released by the anterior pituitary gland, specifically by cells called somatotrophs. Um, Growth hormone works directly on some tissues and indirectly on through another hormone called IGF-1, which is produced mainly by the liver, not river. So the main target organs of growth hormone include the liver, bone, skeletal muscle, and cartilage. Um, and also it works on some general cells that are involved in metabolism. One of the biggest things that growth hormone does is stimulate the liver to release IGF, as we said before. And IGF-1, by the way, stands for insulin-like growth factor. And this is what actually causes the long-term growth, especially in bones and cartilage. Um, Going into a little more depth on the target organs for that. For bones and cartilage, GH and IGF-1 work together to increase bone growth and lengthening, especially during childhood. This is basically what helps the children grow taller. And skeletal muscle, it increases protein synthesis, meaning it helps muscles grow and repair. And for metabolism, GH shifts the body into a growth mode, which increases lipolysis to provide energy as well. And then also in the liver, growth hormone stimulates the production of IGF-1, but it also supports overall metabolism to help regulate blood sugar as well. And it's talked about a lot in the sense of like children and helping children grow, but even in adults, it remains pretty important. It helps muscles maintain mass, and it also supports metabolism and keeps our adult bones healthy as well. So it's still very important for us. Going on to another hormone, we're going to talk about antidiuretic hormone. So, antidiuretic hormone, or ADH, it's also known as vasopressin, and it's a hormone that plays a major role in controlling the body's water balance. It's produced in the hypothalamus, specifically by the supraoptic nucleus, and then it's stored and released by the posterior pituitary gland. The release of ADH is triggered when the body senses that it's losing too much water, or when blood pressure becomes from when blood gets too concentrated. Um, Specialized osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus detect these changes and signal the posterior pituitary to release ADH into the bloodstream. The main target organ of ADH is the kidney, especially the collecting ducts and the distal tubule of the nephron. In the kidneys, ADH increases the permeability of the collecting ducts to water. It does this by inserting special channels called aquaporins into the walls of the tubules, which allow water to be reabsorbed back into the bloodstream instead of simply being lost in the urine. And then when ADH levels are high, the body conserves water. Urine becomes concentrated and the volume of urine drops. This is why it's called an antidiuretic, meaning that it prevents excessive water loss. Also, when ADH levels are low, the collecting ducts stay less permeable to water, which means that more water stays in the urine and the body produces a larger volume of more dilute urine. It also ADH also has an effect on blood vessels. So in high amounts, ADH causes vasoconstriction, which increases blood pressure, and this is why it's called ADH is also known as vasopressin. It increases pressure in the blood vessels. So overall, this hormone is very important for preventing dehydration and keeping the body's water level stable. If it's not responding properly, or if ADH is not released and the kidneys don't respond to it. This is where disorders such as diabetes insipidus can also occur. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the glands involved in the endocrine system now. So we'll talk about um, the thymus. So the thymus is a primary lymphoid organ. It's located in the upper chest, right here. It's just behind the sternum and in front of the heart. It's most active and largest in infancy and childhood, and it gradually gets smaller um, after puberty. So the thymus is divided into two lobes. Each is surrounded by a capsule. Each lobule has each lobe has many lobules, and each lobule has an outer cortex and an inner medulla. Um, this is also important because the T cells mature in stages and different steps occur in each region. So the major cell types in the cortex include the cortical thymocytes, which are the immature T cells. These are the most abundant, and these are early age T cells that are not yet functional, and they undergo positive selection here, which means that only T cells are capable of recognizing self MHCs can survive. They also have cortical thymic epithelial cells, and macrophages are also in the cortex. And macrophages are the cells that clean up and phagocytize red blood cells that fail selection, or thymocytes. Um, and then we have the medulla. The second region is the medulla, which contains more T cells and has cells corpuscles as well. T cells here are the ones that will undergo final maturation. So the types of cells in the medulla include medullary thymocytes, which are more mature T cells, and then medullary thymic epithelial cells as well. Dendritic cells and Hassel's corpuscles are also here, and what Hassel's corpuscles are unique structures found only in the thymic medulla. They're formed from concentric layers of of epithelial cells, and they're also believed to help regulate T cell maturation and assist dendritic cells as well. So that's a little bit about the thymus gland. So we'll talk about the seminiferous tubules next. So these are located within the testes. Let me see. Yeah, these ones are located in the testes. They specifically located in each testicular lobule, and this is the site of sperm production as well. So spermatogenesis, and between the seminiferous tubules are the Leydig cells. These ones produce testosterone, and also Sertoli cells, which support developing sperm cells as well. So that's a little bit about those tubules. Going into the basal ganglia. So the basal ganglia is a group of nuclei in the cerebrum. The main functions of oh, sorry, one second. The main functions of this is sorry, my notes. So the basal ganglia are a group of nuclei located deep within the cerebrum that play a critical role in the movement and of the movement control, posture, and motor learning. They help coordinate voluntary movements and ensure movements are smooth and purposeful. And what's important to note is that, and that we covered in class, is that damage to the basal ganglia can lead to movement disorders such as Parkinson's disease or Huntington's as well. So the main structures of the basal ganglia include the caudate nucleus, which is that C-shaped structure that follows the curve of the lateral head, the curve of the lateral ventricle. It's involved in learning, memory, and voluntary movement control. Next, we have the putamen, which is located lateral to the caudate nucleus and works closely with it to regulate movement and initiation and execution. The globus pallidus, that one regulates voluntary movement by sending inhibitory signals to the thalamus. It's located medial to the putamen. Then we have the subthalamic nucleus, which is a small lens-shaped structure below the thalamus, this is part of an indirect pathway and helps suppress the unwanted movements. The subthalamic uh, the subthalamic nigra is also located in the midbrain, and this one contains dopaminergic neurons that project to the striatum. Um, projects to the striatum, which is, by the way, the striatum is compromised comprised of the caudate and the putamen as well. Sorry, the striatum is made up of the caudate and the putamen. I think I switched the substantia nigra and the subthalamic nucleus. So just know that the subthalamic nucleus is the small lens-shaped structure below the thalamus, and that is what helps suppress the unwanted movements. And the substantia nigra, that is the one that contains dopaminergic neurons and projected striatum. So I switched those two up. Yeah, sorry about that. Just keep that in mind. We're going to talk a little bit about the adrenal cortex. So the adrenal cortex, I think this is our last topic as well, our last slide as well. So the adrenal cortex has 3 layers, each producing a different hormones and then from the outermost to the innermost, we have the zona glomerulosa and the zona fasciculata and then the zona reticularis. So the zona glomerulosa produces each of these 3 distinct layers produces a different type of hormone. So the zona glomerulosa is the outermost layer. It's located just beneath the capsicle of the adrenal gland, which, by the way, for the adrenal glands, they sit on top of each kidney and divide into 2 main regions. They have the adrenal cortex on the outside and then the adrenal medullas on the inside. And then, going back to the adrenal cortex, the main functions of the zona glomerulosa are to produce mineralocorticoids, primarily aldosterone. So aldosterone is important because it helps regulate sodium and potassium levels in the blood, which in turn affects the blood volume and blood pressure as well. An example of this is when blood pressure is low, and then aldosterone will signal to the kidneys to reabsorb sodium, which draws water back into the bloodstream and raises blood pressure. The middle layer is the zona fasciculata, and this is the thickest layer of the cortex. It primarily produces glucocorticoids, and the main one of this is cortisol. So cortisol is critical for the body's stress response. It also helps regulate metabolism by increasing the glucose production through gluconeogenesis. It also helps with protein and fat breakdown for energy, and it helps regulate anti-inflammatory and immunosuppressive effects. And this is important for preventing overreaction in the immune system. So the last layer that we're going to talk about today of the adrenal cortex is the zona reticularis. So this is the deepest layer in the cortex. It's the most innermost, and it's located just above the adrenal medulla. It primarily produces androgens, which are sex hormones, including small amounts of testosterone and precursors to that. So these hormones contribute to puberty, development of secondary sex characteristics, and they also act as precursors that can be converted into estrogens and other tissues as well. Okay, that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I hope it helped and that you learned a little bit from it as well. Thank you so much. Have a good break. Bye.